Hey guys, thanks for checking out the channel. Tobin here with you. Hope everybody's doing fantastic. Sorry I haven't gotten to do a lot of riffs. You know, I've been a busy couple of days. Hope you guys have been digging the interviews that we've thrown up here. Miami Heat camp is underway, and everybody's freaking out about this Kyle Lowry thing. I mean, it's hilarious to see because Kyle going into the last year of his deal, and he's making $30 million. Which is what you got to do in free agency typically, guys. You got to overpay in free agency. Nobody's, it's very rare. When are the times, especially in the NBA these days, where you've looked at a contract at somebody who's not a superstar and you've paid them and you'd be like, got a bargain. It's very rare. It's very rare. Typically, you're just like, oof, that one's gonna hurt on the back end. And I think we all probably thought that with Kyle Lowry. It was gonna be like, that last year, he's going to be 37 years old making $30 million. You know, even to the Damian Lillard thing, like, you're looking and you're like, at the end of that deal, he's making $60 million when he's going to be Kyle Lowry's age. You're like, it did scare off some teams. But the thing that everybody's getting, I just feel like with this Kyle Lowry thing, couple things. If you guys aren't caught up, Kyle Lowry didn't speak to the media at Media Day. He did speak to the media at the first day of Heat training camp. I was not there. I was not boots on the ground for that. I was on the air. But I did see all of this stuff, play out on Twitter as it was coming out there, following, Ira, Anthony, Wes, Ethan, the whole crew, everybody who's got the boots on the ground there. And everybody went into that day freaking out because Kyle Lowry didn't speak at Media Day, which was something I kind of laughed at because it's funny when you go to Heat Media Day. When we go to Heat Media Day, right? We're on the broadcast. We're the flagship station for the Heat, right? And the Heat are always very good to us on Media Day. They basically always, since we've had the Heat rights, have tried to get us everybody. And if they haven't got everybody, it's usually like the top guy they haven't gotten us, right? But, for like since Jimmy's been here, this was the first year we didn't get Jimmy. But they've gotten to Jimmy multiple times, like every year he's been here. And they always like, oh, who do you want? And, between the shows that we do, we usually give a list. I usually give a list of like 10 guys because, I know how it's going to work. Some guys are going to go to the other room. Some guys are going to go to me and Leroy's show. And I think the thing that's weird about this whole thing with Kyle Lowry is, I put down 10 guys, right? And, and the tip, Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, Kevin Love. I don't want to give you the whole list, but the whole point is I got down to 10 guys. Kyle Lowry wasn't even on my list. And I say that as somebody who has enjoyed my time sitting down and doing interviews with Kyle. I find him to be a very interesting dude, very thoughtful dude. And I just thought of this summer, I'm just like, it's so interesting. This wasn't, it was very much like last summer. It was kind of like Kyle's working his ass off. He's out in Vegas. He's at the UFC Performance Center. And I had I follow Kyle's photographer on social media. I feel like he's kind of done the same thing this summer. I just kind of came back. I was like, I don't really have anything for Kyle Lowry. What am I going to say? Hey, Kyle, last year of the deal, is this gone as good? Because I think the Kyle Lowry tenure has been overblown as awful by Heat fans. It hasn't been the best. It hasn't, I think, he typically hasn't lived up to the expectations. A lot of that because of injury. But the Heat have had success with Kyle Lowry on this team. They have not been a bad team because of Kyle Lowry being on this team. And so, I don't know. I just got to Media Day on Monday, and I had even just thought, with the list I'd given the Heat, I hadn't even thought to talk to Kyle Lowry. And then I know a lot of people were like, well, is Kyle even here? And it was weird because I saw people were saying on Twitter, and he was walking around the bowels of the arena. He was just, doing his thing, going to the hot seconds with Jax or whatever photographs they have to take. So I was like unaware that there was this whole Kyle Lowry thing that was going on because I had seen Kyle Lowry down there, but just little let him go about his business because we didn't ask for him. So I'm not going to now hunt him down and be like, hey, Kyle, will you talk to us? And I just thought it was one of those things where it's like Kyle Lowry not speaking was almost a bigger deal than anything he could have said. Now, was he making some kind of a stand? I don't know, because he then came the next day and he spoke at training camp. And this has got everybody all hot and bothered because Kyle Lowry is saying he expects to be the starting point guard for the Miami Heat. And I don't know why people have a problem with this. I think it's a strange thing because the Heat don't have a starting point guard right now. It's not like he said, I demand it. He goes, I expect of myself to be the starting point guard. I haven't spoken with Spo about it. And him and Spo have had a pretty cordial, decent relationship. They saw each other in Vegas when it was the World with the World Cup team. And, he came into this thing with a previous relationship with Erik Spoelstra. I think it's a pretty mutually respectful relationship. And I don't find this to be a big deal because if he's not going to start and Erik Spoelstra decides that he's not going to start, then he's not going to start. And I think Kyle Lowry is going to show up to work and do the best of his job because he's a professional. And they've already had this conversation. So I see everybody like melting down, getting all crazy because Kyle Lowry has the audacity to say, I expect to start. And people are freaking out on him. And I don't really understand why. I get it. Kyle Lowry's not Damian Lillard. I get it. Kyle Lowry has not been playing at an all-star level since he has been on the Heat. But he's also had good moments. He has not been. And I say this as somebody who didn't come into the Kyle Lowry thing as the biggest Kyle Lowry fan. I had all those battles in Toronto. I didn't, nobody likes their team playing against Kyle Lowry. He's a pain in the ass. He is taking charges all over the place. He complains to the referee. If he's not on your team, of course you would hate Kyle Lowry. But it was nothing personal. The guy seemed like a personally completely nice individual. And I don't have a problem with him having the expectation to start because I know Erik Spoelstra handles these things and these uncomfortable conversations as good as anybody in the league. And if he doesn't want something to be the case, then it's not going to happen. And it's going to be fine. Will Kyle Lowry be like shooting rainbows and sunshine and popcorn out of his ass because, don't worry, Spo, I'll just take the role you give me? Yeah, maybe not, but he'll do it. I think he'll do it. I don't think this is going to be a thing. Like, think of the guys that Erik Spoelstra has had the conversations of coming off the bench. Dwayne Wade, Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry. Oh, yeah, Kyle Lowry's already on that list because he already had this talk last year with Kyle Lowry and his hamstring. And I really don't think that he'd have to do it anything differently than that. It's like, hey, man, you've broken down physically the last couple of years. We're trying to save your minutes. Same thing. You're a year older. Same thing goes for this year. For what it's worth, I thought Kyle Lowry looked in pretty good shape at Heat Media Day. But this is a conversation Erik Spoelstra's already had. And I don't know. I think it's a couple things. I think, one, Kyle Lowry and his contract, people thought maybe he was going to be gone at the deadline last year. Jimmy kind of threw cold water on that. And then Kyle Lowry was decent in the playoffs, man. Kyle Lowry had some big moments for the Heat in the playoffs. He was good being that captain off the bench for the Miami Heat. He was. I do think that, his with Gabe last year emerging as he did, it did become a bit of a luxury, just kind of like it did in Toronto with Fred VanVleet. And yeah, he didn't physically hold up in his first year. That was after, and that was in the midst of him also dealing with some real personal stuff, which, dealt with that first year. Came in last year with a lot more comfort around Miami, a lot more comfort around the guys, a lot more comfort. This is the other thing, too. Kyle Lowry, it's been said that Kyle Lowry doesn't have a good relationship with the media down here. I'm not around the Heat every day, but I'm around the Heat enough. I don't have that sense of Kyle Lowry. I think Kyle Lowry's been nothing but professional to deal with. He's not honestly, the only time I've ever seen Kyle Lowry get anything upset about anybody is when there's been a bunch of media in the locker room because he has like the first one in on the door, and people like step on his shit around his locker, which is kind of an understandable thing. And one of the things that's like about locker rooms, you're like, it's and the Heat have like this circular locker room. It's a little bit weird, but I can understand people not touch. I don't want people to touch my shit. Like I can understand people being somebody being upset about that, but talking like Kyle Lowry usually talked at his locker. Usually was one of the first people to talk, and usually was very professional. Like, and in my couple of one-on-ones with him, super nice guy, super affable, super talkative. Had some really interesting stuff to say. So I don't know. First guy out there warming up every single day. He's got the same warm up routine that he's had every single the 2 years that he's been here. So I don't know, man. I just thought it was a little bit overblown. I think people are pissed off just in genuine in Heat Nation because they didn't get Damian Lillard. You got like your head hanging on this year. You look at Kyle Lowry's salary. You're like, oh, why can't they be spent on somebody better? It's like, all right, but they did get him. Like it was a big acquisition at the time, and it hasn't worked out, mostly because his body hasn't held up. So I just find it odd that we're like getting upset with stupid stuff like, oh, he didn't talk to the media at Media Day. It's like, dude, he was like the 10th most interesting guy to talk to at Media Day. Who cares? Then he talks the next day, and everybody gets mad at what he says that I expect to be the starter. And then Spo saying, I'm going to determine that in camp. Player has expectations. Coach has his reasons for why he hasn't made those expectations yet. These are not... Spo's done this with Duncan Robinson, making a ton of money, and he started Max Strus. He's done this with Gabe Vincent, making a lot less money than Kyle Lowry, and he started him. Eric Spoelstra doesn't give a rat's ass. It's okay for Kyle Lowry to have expectations. It's also okay because Eric Spoelstra is going to handle the conversation how he's got to handle it. And Heat fans are freaking out like this is, this is James Harden, our version of James Harden. I don't know if you're just dying for drama or what. And it was funny because even like the Heat have done a couple of funny things on social media, kind of like subtweeting people, where there was this report from a former Heat reporter that said like 98.9% of the Heat, which is a very odd number, of the Heat organization was upset by Jimmy's emo thing. And he's like, oh, they didn't even like LeBron wearing headbands. And so the Heat then tweet out, headband Jimmy is back. And that was funny. And then the other thing was, this whole thing goes down yesterday. And what's the video that he tweeted out from camp? Kyle Lowry teaching Jaime Jaquez post moves and footwork, which is another thing people, I think, have mischaracterized about Kyle Lowry. Guy is a good leader. Is he the rah-rah captain of the team? No. But important influence on Gabe Vincent? Tyler Hero? You bet your ass. And now he's doing it with Jaime Jaquez. So all I'm saying is I think the Heat fan is a little bit on edge and pissed off right now. I think you're aiming it in the wrong direction at Kyle Lowry. Ideally, would I like Kyle Lowry to live up to his $30 million salary and ball out? Of course. But, it is what it is at this point. Kyle Lowry has been, I don't think, an abject failure as a signing. I think he's had some really good moments when the Heat were really banged up that first year they were the 1 seed. Kyle Lowry, huge catalyst in what they needed. Was dealing with a lot of shit in the off the court. Physically didn't come back. Unfortunate. He got hurt. Last year, was dealing with the hamstring. They tried to monitor the minutes and keep it limited on him. By the time it was playoff time, he had some really good moments. Tom Thibodeau told you he was basically one of the big reasons they won that Knicks series. And mind you, how banged up Jimmy was in that series. So I don't know, man. I think Heat fans are being a little bit unfair to Kyle Lowry. I think, and again, I say this as somebody who didn't come into the Kyle Lowry signing like thrilled about it, because Kyle Lowry was a pain in the ass to play against. I wasn't a huge Kyle Lowry fan, but he's been fine. It hasn't been a home run, but I would say it's been like a double. And him not talking to the media on media day, who cares? You heard from the guys you wanted to hear from on media day. Be honest about it. You heard from Tyler and Bam and Jimmy and Spo. Those are the 4 guys you really wanted to hear from. Okay. Then you got to training camp. Kyle Lowry spoke about it. And he gave you his expectation. And then everybody's like, Kyle, you expect to start? It's like, well, I mean, we don't have a point guard on the roster. Tyler's a shooting guard, and I'm just saying. It's not like they have it's not like Dame arrived and he was like, I still demand to be the starting point guard. It's like, no, there isn't a starting point guard. Why is this an outrageous thing for Kyle Lowry to say? So I just think Heat fans need to calm down with this thing. That's just me. Maybe this ends up being a huge dramatic thing. I don't think it is. I think we're overblowing it because we're dying for some drama, or we're dying for some feelings, or we're lashing out because Damian Lillard's not here. But, Kyle Lowry not speaking to the media, the picture painted of him being like this media malcontent, way overblown. I mean, so overblown. I can't even tell you. He is cordial, professional. Is Kyle Lowry like buddy like some of the other media guys? No, but he's been in the league for 17 years and he doesn't need to be. But I thought, wow, that's been way overblown these last 2 days. And him not wanting to start, hey man, Eric Spoelstra's been there, done that. He'll handle it. They'll be fine. So I just think Heat Nation's got to calm down with this stuff.